His name was William Holmes McGuffey, born this day, September 23, 1800. Considered the schoolmaster of the nation, McGuffey's readers were the mainstay of America's public school system from 1836 till the 1920s. McGuffey was the president of Ohio University and formed the first teachers association in that part of the nation. In his fifth eclectic reader, William McGuffey wrote, "Erase all thought and fear of God from a community, and selfishness and sensuality would absorb the whole man."
This has been an American Minute with Bill Federer. For a free transcript, call American Minute at 1-888-USA-WORD.
VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
Thank you for joining us on Crosstalk today. And friends, another warning coming your way here from Crosstalk regarding the UN Summit of the Future that is underway. Now, without question, there is a compulsion on various entities to bring about global control over every nation around the world. Nationalism's out the window, folks. It's globalism. We must have global control. Happening as we speak is the Summit of the Future that is taking place. According to the United Nations, the Summit of the Future is a high-level event bringing together world leaders to forge a new international consensus on delivering a better present and safeguarding the future. Effective global cooperation is critical to our survival, but difficult to achieve in an atmosphere of mistrust, using outdated structures that no longer reflect today's political and economic realities. The summit will adopt 3 agreements: a pact for the future, a global digital compact, and a declaration on future generations. Well, friends, the UN is reporting that yesterday they adopted what they called the potentially game-changing pact for the future. By consensus, with a small group of just 7 countries holding out, having failed to pass a last-minute amendment, they are calling this a once-in-a-generation opportunity to reimagine, or rather to re-image, the multilateral system and steer humanity on a new course to meet existing commitments and solve long-term challenges. Every word, friends, you can almost digest and dissect from what they are saying. Now, Alex Newman is attending the Summit of the Future. He is going to be with us, Lord willing, next week, Tuesday, to further discuss what is unfolding at the Summit of the Future and its ramifications on the United States, as well as its ramifications on the world as a whole. But today I want to share with you more about this pact for the future that they've already passed. Russia led the opposition to this, friends. The United States was not part of the opposition at all. The United States was lockstep and barrel, evidently, with this. But make no mistake that nationalism has no place at the United Nations. It is all about globalism. It's been said that many times global problems demand global solutions. We've heard that over and over again. And that's why there are those who are pushing for global control over every man, woman, and child on this planet. That includes where you live, how you live, what jobs are available, what energy you use, what type of vehicle you have, or if you even have a vehicle. It wants control over food supplies, even the types of food available to eat. Beef is out the window. We've talked about the war on beef. It includes the use of farmland and what fertilizers can or cannot be used. It includes population control. It includes attack on private property. I mean, literally, it strikes at the very heart of our nation's sovereignty, including our Constitution. Today, we're going to be sharing with you information on this pact for the future. And first of all, I would like to take you to the opening of this summit that happened yesterday. This was the very opening of the Summit of the Future, taking place right here on U.S. soil.
The third plenary meeting of the General Assembly is called to order. I declare open the Summit of the Future. This summit is held in accordance with Resolution 76/307 of 8 September 2022 and Decisions 78/555 of 10th July 2024 and 78/564B of 6 September 2024 and takes place under Agenda Item 123, 123, entitled Strengthening of the United Nations System. In connection with this item, the Assembly has before it a draft resolution issued as document A/79/L2 and a draft amendment issued as document A/79/L3. The draft resolution before the Assembly contains the Pact of the Future and its annexes, the Global Digital Compact, and the Declaration on Future Generations. They represent the combination of many months of negotiations and embody compromise from all sides. No internationally agreed document is perfect. However, I strongly believe that the Pact, Compact, and Declaration represent the broadest support of member states. I urge all states to support the adoption of the Pact of the Future and its annexes.
That was a very opening of the Summit for the Future that took place at the United Nations. And certainly there is much warning regarding this Pact for the Future, multiple page document. And we're going to be sharing that with you. They have the Pact for the Future, the Global Digital Compact, and the Declaration on Future Generations. We're really just going to be able to scratch the surface today. We're going to talk about specifically this Pact for the Future. Again, Lord willing, next Tuesday, Alex Newman will be with us, and we'll be looking at so much more of what has transpired here. But just a week ago, House Republicans were standing up to what they called a push by the United Nations and the World Health Organization to extinguish U.S. sovereignty and free speech, reports the Daily Signal. Congressman Ralph Norman of South Carolina, Bob Good of Virginia, they led a press conference with fellow GOP congressmen on the very first day of Constitution Week to oppose ongoing initiatives of the United Nations and the World Health Organization, one of its component organizations. Congressman Good said the Biden-Harris administration wants America to be subordinated to the governed by the UN, the World Health Assembly, and the World Health Organization, saying they seek to facilitate the evolution of the UN from an international cooperative body to an international governing body. Did you hear that? Do you catch that? Going from an international cooperative body to an international governing body. Good said he is shocked by the lack of attention to the issue in the news media. This weekend, the United Nations hosting a conference called Summit of the Future, discussing 3 proposed international agreements, the Pact for the Future, the Declaration on Future Generations, and the Global Digital Compact. The Pact for UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres produced a report in 2021 called Our Common Agenda, which used COVID-19 as justification for increasing the UN's power to address world crises because it wasn't feasible to rely on member nations to do the right thing. The Pact for the Future includes an emergency platform that would give Guterres the power as UN chief to address what the agreement calls global shocks. Large-scale climatic or environmental events that cause major socio-economic disruptions and or environmental degradation, future pandemics with cascading secondary impacts, high-impact events including a biological agent, deliberate or accidental, events leading to disruptions to global flows of goods or people or finance, large-scale destructive and or disruptive activity in cyberspace or disruptions to global digital connectivity, a major major event in outer space that causes severe disruptions to one or several critical systems on Earth, an unforeseen risk. You've heard this talked about. Last week, this was reported here over VCY America Network. But now, over the weekend, just yesterday, passing this compact for the Pact for the Future. As we enter our second segment of Crosstalk today, I'm going to be playing for you the remarks that were given yesterday by the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, as he was urging nations to get involved to support this very document. It is a pact for the future. The scope is extraordinary. It's calling for huge increases in foreign aid and funding to developing countries for climate change, endorsing government censorship of what they view as misinformation and disinformation, affirming human rights that the U.S. does not recognize, and chastening countries for not ratifying treaties on small arms, ammunitions, and other matters. That's reported here by the Daily Signal. As envisioned by the United Nations Secretary General, this is a new global deal to reinvigorate the structures and the trust necessary for effective global governance, with the United Nations as the center of it all. Now, friends, please know that this is propelling us to what is this one world system, politically, economically, and even spiritually. As we see that even on the spiritual realm, Pope Francis has been all about this, all about it, and the fight against so-called, global warming and climate change and so forth and so on. But the UN director, the Secretary General Guterres, says that this must be more than just talk, demanding action as take place. The pact adopted at the opening of the two-day Summit of the Future called by the UN Secretary General Guterres, reports AP News, who thanked leaders and diplomats for taking the first steps and unlocking the door to a better future. He said, "We are here to bring multilateralism back from the brink. Now it is our common destiny to walk through it that demands not just agreements, but action." The UN chief challenged the leaders to implement the pact, prioritize dialogue and negotiations, end wars tearing our world apart from the Middle East to Ukraine and Sudan, reform the powerful UN Secretary Council. I thought the UN was established to see that we never would have these world conflicts again. Whatever happened? To accelerate reforms of the international financial system, ramp up a transition from fossil fuels, listen to young people and include them in the decision-making. The pact's fate was in question until the last moment. There was so much suspense that Guterres, we're told, had 3 prepared speeches, one for approval, one for rejection, and one if things were not clear. That was said by UN spokesperson Stephanie Dujarric. No one is happy with this pact, said Russia's deputy foreign minister. The summit opened with him proposing amendments that would have significantly watered down the pact. It was led by Russia. Russia only got support from Iran, Belarus, North Korea, Nicaragua, Sudan, and Syria. Assembly President Philemon Yang then put the pact to a vote and banged his gavel, signifying the consensus of all 193 UN member nations that was required for approval. Yang announced ahead of speeches by world leaders that they would be muted after 5 minutes, a very rare occurrence at the United Nations, where words are its very backbone. Well, friends, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be hearing the opening that was given yesterday by the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres. And then, as time permits, we're just going to open the pages of this multi-page document here, this pact for the future, and share with you some of the things that are in this document that they say was agreed to yesterday at this Summit of the Future. Back in 1 minute, you're listening to Crosstalk on the VCY America Network.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, scientist and creation seminar speaker with the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, do creationists sometimes use bogus arguments for creation?
Unfortunately, they do, Chris. Some favorite arguments that sound so good really aren't well established. Thankfully, there is plenty of good evidence that creationists can use. One example of an outdated argument is the possible human footprints found in the same strata as dinosaur footprints in Texas. Now, I was one of the original developers of this theory and published the authoritative book on it. But the more research we did, the more we saw problems. So I removed my book from the market and we no longer use that claim. I feel it's too ambiguous to use. Now, others still do use that argument, and while I don't oppose them, I do encourage them to use the better evidence. True evidence for creation is strong and convincing, especially as we use that back to Genesis perspective.
This is Chris O'Brien. Thanks for going back to Genesis.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. This past Saturday evening at the Waukesha Expo, Gary Kah spoke, warning us of what was coming globally and gave reference to the Summit of the Future and the very decisions that were being made this coming weekend. And now part of this summit is over. I mean, it's carrying on as we speak today, but passing this Pact for the Future. Now, we're going to share some of the things and the various action points that are part of this Pact for the Future. And again, Lord willing, 1 week from tomorrow, next Tuesday, Alex Newman's scheduled to be with us. He is attending this, digesting what is taking place. He'll be breaking it down for us and its impact not only upon the United States, but around the world as well. But yesterday, the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, gave these remarks near the beginning of the summit.
Mr. President of the General Assembly, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Summit of the Future. I thank the co-facilitators, the former and current presidents of the General Assembly and all member states for their strong engagement, creativity and spirit of compromise, and all my colleagues for their invaluable efforts over the past 3 years. We are here to bring multilateralism back from the brink. I called for this summit to consider deep reforms to make global institutions more legitimate, fair and effective based on the values of the UN Charter. I called for this summit because 21st century challenges require 21st century solutions, frameworks that are networked and inclusive, and that draw on the expertise of all of humanity. I called for this summit because our world is heading off the rails, and we need tough decisions to get back on track. Conflicts are raging and multiplying, from the Middle East to Ukraine and Sudan with no end in sight. Our collective security system is threatened by geopolitical divides, nuclear posturing, and the development of new weapons and theaters of war. Resources that could bring opportunities and hope are invested in death and destruction. Huge inequalities are a brake on sustainable development. Many developing countries are drowning in debt and unable to support their people. And we have no effective global response to emerging, complex, and even existential threats. The climate crisis is destroying lives, devastating communities, and ravaging economies. And we all know the solution: a just phase out of fossil fuels, and yet emissions are still rising. New technologies, including AI, are being developed in a moral and legal vacuum without governance or guardrails. And in short, our multilateral tools and institutions are unable to respond effectively to today's political, economic, environmental, and technological challenges. And tomorrow's will be even more difficult and even more dangerous. When the United Nations was established nearly 8 years ago, it had 51 member states. Today they are 193. The global economy was less than 1/12 of its current size. As a result, our peace and security tools and institutions and our global financial architecture reflect a bygone era. The United Nations Security Council is outdated, and its authority is eroding. And unless its composition and working methods are reformed, it will eventually lose all credibility. The international financial architecture was established when many of today's developing countries were under colonial rule. It does not represent the realities of today's global economy and is no longer able to resolve economic challenges, debt, climate action, sustainable development. It does not provide the global safety net that developing countries need. Meanwhile, technology, geopolitics, and globalization have transformed power relations. Our world is going through a time of turbulence and a period of transition. But we cannot wait for perfect conditions. We must take the first decisive steps towards updating and reforming international cooperation and make it more networked, more fair, and more inclusive now. And today, thanks to your efforts, we have. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the Pact for the Future, the Global Digital Compact, and the Declaration on Future Generations open pathways to new possibilities and opportunities. On peace and security, they promise a breakthrough on reforms to make the Security Council more reflective of today's world, addressing the historic underrepresentation of Africa, Asia-Pacific, and Latin America. They lay the foundations for a more agile peace-building commission and for a fundamental review of peace operations to make them fit for the conditions they face. They represent the first agreed multilateral support for nuclear disarmament in more than a decade. They recognize the changing nature of conflict and commit to steps to prevent an arms race in outer space and to govern the use of lethal autonomous weapons. They include measures to mount an immediate and coordinated response to complex global shocks. On sustainable development, these agreements represent major progress towards groundbreaking reforms of the international financial architecture. They will help to make its institutions more representative of today's world, capable of mounting a stronger response to today's challenges, and able to provide an effective global safety net for developing countries at a time when many of them are suffocating in debt and unable to make progress on the SDGs. The Pact for the Future is about turbocharging the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement, accelerating a just transition away from fossil fuels, and securing a peaceful and livable future for everyone on our planet. It includes a groundbreaking commitment by governments to listen to young people and include them in decision-making at the national and global levels. And it commits to stronger partnerships with civil society, the private sector, local and regional authorities, and more. The Global Digital Compact is based on the principle that technology should benefit everyone. It includes the first truly universal agreement on the international governance of artificial intelligence. It commits governments to establishing an independent international scientific panel on AI and initiating a global dialogue on its governance within the United Nations. The Global Digital Compact represents the first collective effort to reach agreed interoperability standards essential for consistent measurement. And it supports networks and partnerships to build capacity on AI in developing countries. And the Declaration on Future Generations echoes the call of the United Nations Charter to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, committing governments for the first time to taking the interest of our descendants into account in decisions we take today. Respect for human rights, cultural diversity, and gender equality are woven into all three agreements. In the face of a surge in misogyny and the rollback of women's reproductive rights, governments have explicitly committed to removing the legal, social, and economic barriers that prevent women and girls from fulfilling their potential in every sphere.
Okay, now he's going to continue on, but he changes languages at this point. So we have just a couple more minutes that we're going to air from his address that he gave, and let you hear, though, the English interpreter. But did you hear how he said that this is going to be a turbocharging of the strategic development goals? Friends, we have done so many programs about Agenda 2030 and the strategic development goals. Alex Newman has been with us. Gary Kah has addressed this. Tom DeWeese extensively has dealt with this as well here on Crosstalk. But also in the final 30 seconds of his speech, if you caught him using the words on the cultural diversity, gender identity is woven all throughout these documents. That's right, gender identity. Cultural diversity, woven all throughout these. Let's just continue with what he had to say, and then the English interpreter, but he changed languages right in his speech.
Excellencies, I welcome these three historic agreements, which mark a shift toward that is more effective, more inclusive, and that is more network-based in its functioning. I fought for the ideas contained in these agreements since the very first day of my mandate, and I will be totally committed to their implementation until the very last day. We have unlocked the door. Now it is our common responsibility to walk through it. That requires not just agreement, but action. And today, I challenge you to take that action, to implement the pact for the future by prioritizing dialogue and negotiation, ending the wars that are tearing our world apart, and reforming the composition and working methods of the Security Council, to accelerate reforms of the international financial system, including at next year's conference on financing for development, to put humanity's best interests at the front and center of new technologies. Our success or failure hinges not on the adoption of agreements, but on our actions and their impact on the lives of the people that we serve. Excellencies, throughout my life, whether as an activist or at the United Nations, I have learned that people never agree on the past. To rebuild trust, we must start from the present and look toward the future. Throughout the world, people are hoping for a future of peace, dignity, and prosperity. They're crying out for global action to solve the climate crisis, tackle inequality, and address new and emerging risks that threaten everyone. And they see the United Nations as being essential to solving these challenges. All this was confirmed during the past two inspirational action days. The Summit of the Future sets a course toward international cooperation that can meet their expectations. Now we're taking these first important steps together, and I congratulate all member states for playing their part. Now, let's get to work. Thank you.
This is Crosstalk on VCY America. Again, that was an interpreter now for the conclusion of Guterres' remarks as he gave them at the beginning of the Summit of the Future. And we'll delve into some of the action points. There are some 60-some action points. 56 actions that came out of this summit meeting. We'll be back in 1 minute. You're listening to Crosstalk.
Just as the moon obscures the sun's light during an eclipse, today's radical secularism has obscured the light of God. But God's light still shines. This month, the VCY Bookstore and Outreach Center has Erwin Lutzer's brand new book called The Eclipse of God at 51% off. In The Eclipse of God, Dr. Lutzer exposes our nation's disastrous efforts to redefine God in its own image. The resulting damage has been so great that confusion about God has even crept into the church. This bold exposition will help you understand society's attempts to make God inclusive and sin-friendly in contrast with the biblical truth about his unchanging character. Get Lutzer's new book, The Eclipse of God, at 51% off only during September and only at the VCY Bookstore and Outreach Center. Order online at vcy.com or call 888-722-4829.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America with a warning today regarding the Summit of the Future. I understand they just adjourned their session according to their agenda a little bit ago, just within the last couple of hours. They had a couple of days of action days, last Friday and Saturday, and then Sunday and today being the Summit of the Future. And it appears that they had already agreed in principle to the very document that they were passing yesterday, that they had agreed. And though Russia had its objection, and a few countries joined with Russia in its objection, not enough to stop this from moving forward. As we take a look at this, the United Nations says the purpose of the Summit of the Future for 2024 is effective global cooperation is increasingly critical to our survival, but difficult to achieve in an atmosphere of mistrust using outdated structures that no longer reflect today's political and economic realities. The Summit of the Future is a chance to get back on track. It will consider how we cooperate both to achieve agreed goals and to tackle emerging threats and opportunities. It will result in an intergovernmentally agreed Pact for the Future. It's an opportunity for initiatives and commitments from a wide array of stakeholders. The summit can reinvigorate the structures and the trust necessary for effective global governance. That's what it's all about, folks. Global governance. One world system. One world control. For a long time, we've been warning about what's being promoted. Promote this one world system, one world governance, taking a one world system economically, politically, and even spiritually. And folks, this summit that has just concluded here earlier today is propelling us toward that very aspect. I'll have some more thoughts on that a little bit later in the program. But I want to read for you from their document, this Pact for the Future. And it starts out almost like with the preamble. We, the heads of state and government, representing the peoples of the world, have gathered at United Nations headquarters to protect the needs and interests of present and future generations through the actions in this Pact for the Future. Friends, this is happening on American soil. The subversion of our Constitution. The subversion of your rights, your private property, your freedom of speech. You know, the rights and liberties that we hold dear, we would just give sway to the United Nations. We warned you this past year, in the last couple of years, about what was happening with that World Pandemic Treaty and how that is being, stopped here at this May, but it was not stopped its official adaptation of it, but it's going to be back again. But folks, this kind of document like this propels us into these very types of things. Control over our world's food supplies, medicines. Yes, they will have authority to determine, well, okay, you got too much here in this country, we're going to shift your stock over here. We determine that these people are more underprivileged, they should have this first. We, at a time of profound global transformation, they write, we are confronted by rising catastrophic and existential risk, many caused by the choices we make. Fellow human beings are enduring terrible suffering. If we do not change course, we risk tipping into a future of persistent crises and breakdown. Folks, that's exactly where this is going to lead us. They say, yet this is almost a moment of hope and opportunity. Global transformation is a chance for renewal and progress grounded in our common humanity. Advances in knowledge, science, technology, and innovation could deliver a breakthrough to a better and more sustainable future for all. The choice is ours. We believe that there is a path to a brighter future for all of humanity, including those living in poverty and vulnerable situations. Through the actions we take today, we resolve to set ourselves on that path, striving for a world that is safe, peaceful, just, equal, inclusive, sustainable, and prosperous, a world in which well-being, security, and dignity, and a healthy planet are assured for all humanity. That's just 4 points out of some 19. That's kind of like the preamble to this pact for the future. I do want to share with you some of the actions that this pact calls for, this pact for the future, which they have agreed upon yesterday. Action number 1, we will take bold, ambitious, accelerated, just, and transformative actions to implement the 2030 Agenda, achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, and leave no one behind. Friends, this is putting the Agenda 2030 on steroids. They said we will scale up our efforts toward the full implementation of 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, to fully implement the commitments in the political declaration at the SDG Summit in 2023, that's Sustainable Development Goals Summit, mobilize significant and adequate resources and investments from all sources for sustainable development, remove all obstacles to sustainable development, and refrain from economic coercion. All obstacles to sustainable development. Friends, they mean what they say. Action number 2, we will place the eradication of poverty at the center of our efforts to achieve 2030 Agenda. They're not going to get rid of poverty. Action 3, we will end hunger and eliminate food insecurity and all forms of malnutrition. How can they do that, folks, when they're already prohibiting certain lands from being farmed? How can they do that when they have a war on beef that is taking place? The hunger and the poverty is only going to increase. Here they say they will promote equitable, resilient, inclusive, and sustainable agri-food systems so that everyone has access to safe, affordable, sufficient, and nutritious food. Crickets, here we come. Action number 4, we will close the Sustainable Development Goal financing gap in developing countries. We decided to provide and mobilize sustainable, affordable, accessible, transparent, and predictable development finance from all sources and the required means of implementation to developing countries. U.S., you've got too much money. You give this much to this country, this much to this country, this. We need to have equitable treatment of all. Action 5, we will ensure that the multilateral trading systems continue to be an engine for sustainable development. Listen to this. We are committed to a rules-based, non-discriminatory, open, fair, inclusive, equitable, and transparent multilateral trading system with the World Trade Organization at its core. We understand the importance of the multilateral trading system contributing to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. We reiterate that states are strongly urged to refrain from promulgating and applying unilateral economic measures not in accordance with international law and the Charter of the United Nations that impede the full achievement of economic and social development, particularly in developing countries. Friends, you know what this would do? U.S., you are not entitled to hold sanctions against another country. What? You want Iran to do X, Y, and Z? You cannot put sanctions against them. That's against international law. That violates our United Nations agreement that we have with countries, or whatever country we would choose to have sanctions against. Action 6, we will invest in people to end poverty and strengthen trust and social cohesion by promoting universal health coverage, increase access to quality inclusive education and lifelong learning, including in emergencies, and improve opportunities for decent work for all, universal access to social protection to eradicate poverty and reduce inequalities. Folks, this is socialism for all. Socialism for all. Ensure, and guess who's making the decisions for this? Oh, thank you, Mr. Guterres. Ensure access for all to adequate, safe, and affordable housing and support developing countries to plan and implement just, safe, healthy, accessible, resilient, and sustainable cities. Friends, we've been warning for years and years about this. Tom DeWeese, I can hear his words echoing in my mind. Alex Newman, we've been hearing from. Gary Kah, Michelle Bachmann, and others. Accelerate efforts to ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all, including efforts for resilient and secure cross-border energy infrastructure and increase sustainability, the share of renewable energy. Action number 7, we will sustain our efforts to build peaceful, just, and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels that uphold human rights and fundamental freedoms. Friends, I can already see I'm only going to get through a portion of this material today. Action 8, we will achieve gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls as a crucial contribution to progress across the Sustainable Development Goals and progress. Undertake reforms to give women equal rights to economic resources, as well as access to ownership and control over land and other forms of property, financial services, inheritance, natural resources, and appropriate new technology in accordance with national laws. Ensure universal access to sexual and reproductive health and reproductive rights agreed in accordance with the Program of Action of the International Conference on Population Development and the Beijing Platform for Action and the outcome documents of their review conferences. You understand what they're talking about here? This reproductive health? Yes, they want to bring about the right, so-called right, for women to kill their unborn babies in the womb and force this upon the nations of the world. Action 9, we will strengthen our actions to address climate change, reaffirm the Paris Agreement temperature goal of holding the increase in global temperatures. They've got multiple sections on this. Action 10, accelerate our efforts to restore, protect, conserve, and sustainably use the environment. Ranchers, sorry, you can't plant there. We need to preserve that land. We've got other purposes for it. No, those of you who have beef cattle, no, you can't do that. We need to, reduce our use of red meats. We'll protect and promote culture and sports as integral components of sustainable development. That's Action 11. Action 12, we'll plan for the future and strengthen our collective efforts to turbocharge and fully implement the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development by 2030 and beyond. Action 14, will protect all civilians in armed conflict. Interesting. That's a lot to play out there. Action 15, ensure that people affected by humanitarian emergencies receive the support they need. Last week, we just read about Hamas confiscating all these supplies, these relief supplies, putting them in these big storehouses, wondering what they're going to do with them. They're overflowing. We will fulfill our obligation to comply with the decisions that uphold the mandate of the International Court of Justice in any case to which our state is a party. Goodbye, court system. Goodbye, U.S. Constitution. We'll accelerate the implementation of our commitment on women, peace, and security. We'll accelerate the implementation of our commitments on youth, peace, and security. On and on these go, friends. Some 50-some actions. We'll uphold our disarmament obligations and commitments. Let me go here to, we'll invest the social and economic development of children and young people that they can reach their full potential. Accelerate efforts to achieve universal health coverage to ensure that all young people enjoy the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health, including immunizations and vaccinations and sexual and reproductive health, and address all the challenges faced by developing countries in achieving these goals. If your state was going to have laws that said, no, children, you cannot mutilate your bodies because you think that you're of the opposite gender, goodbye to that sound thinking. On and on it goes, friends. I wish I had more time, but we're going to be taking a break. If you want to comment, I'm going to have some thoughts. What can you do? I'll have some thoughts on that right after the break. Our phone number here to Crosstalk, if you'd like to weigh in on this, our number is 800-733-9829. That's 800-733-9829. We will strengthen the response of the Security Council for the maintenance of international peace and security and its relationship with the General Assembly. Everything is pointing them back to the General Assembly of the United Nations. They are talking about worldwide governance. That's what they are promoting through this document, which, by the way, passed yesterday. Back in a minute here on Crosstalk.
For the Worldview Report, I'm Brennan House. Our website is worldviewtube.com. I've been teaching through the book of Revelation on Sunday nights. You can watch it at worldviewtube.com. We're now in Revelation chapter 6. We now have the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. The Lord God himself is opening the seals. And the first one is a white horse. It's the Antichrist, and he's bringing false peace. Oh, wow. Isn't that what the world's looking for now? An end to all the wars and rumors of wars and all this happening, but he'll do it with a false peace. And then the second seal is a red horse, and he brings war. The Antichrist has to go to war to take out certain leaders to bring the New World Order. Isn't that interesting? And then the third seal, a black horse. Famine, just as globalist leaders are trying to starve us now by destroying farming and dairy. And then the fourth seal, a pale horse of death and hell and pandemics, as we have bioweapon labs all over the world. Man, sinful man, is setting up for the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse.
You're listening to Crosstalk on the VCY America network, and Summit of the Future is underway. Today's Crosstalk, a warning. Just a few thoughts. What can we do? And number one, friends, is always the answer, and that is pray. The Scripture says to call unto me, and I will answer thee, and show thee great and mighty things which thou knowest not. We need to commit this to the Lord in prayer. And really pray even that the forces of darkness would be bound in advancing this, and that they would be led to confusion in their efforts to bring these things about. Number two is to reach out to your members of the House and Senate. And you can let them know, it's my personal opinion to reject actions by the United Nations, to reject their our takeover of our sovereignty as a nation, and to certainly exploit Americans for the UN agenda. This is striking at our sovereignty as a nation and our U.S. Constitution and individual rights. And you have the right to let your congressmen and senators know about this. Number three would be that of informing others about what's taking place. Send a link to this program. It's going to be posted within just a couple hours on our website. Share it with others. Get CD copies and send them to those who have CD players. And listen online. Inform others. And then also, friends, so vitally important, when we see these things come to pass, how critical it is for us to share the gospel. We are fast propelling toward this one world system. And our eyes should be awakened that time is short here upon this earth. People need Jesus. People need the gospel. We're called to be ambassadors of Jesus Christ. We're called to be light. We're called to be salt here on this earth. So these are some things that I see. But let's go to the phone lines here today. Get your reaction. We're going to begin with Mark in Newark, Ohio. You're on the air, Mark.
Yes, I got a question. If we happen to get President Trump back, can the United States pull out of that agreement, or are we stuck in that?
It's a great question. I don't have all the action steps because the documents are just being agreed to here over the weekend, and I don't know about any opt-outs or what's coming up, so I'm really going to be leaning heavily upon Alex next week as far as what people can do, but certainly I know last week the House of Representatives passed a measure for the not allowing this pandemic act for the U.S. to agree to it without approval of the U.S. Senate. It's a treaty, and this would be a treaty too, and to force the Senate to such a vote. So President Trump has taken very strong stands against the United Nations, globalism, and things like this. But what actions are available, I don't know at this point. I don't. Our Senate certainly has not ratified this, and we would have to demand that they see this as a treaty that could be revoked.
Right. Okay. I just want to say that I'm praying for the United States, praying for us, and getting the gospel out. I think we're in the end times, and we can try to slow it down, but I don't think we're going to stop it. But this is God's will.
Thank you. Yep, God's will be done. God's will be done, certainly, in all of this. And certainly we cry out against evil. We cry out against wickedness. Merle in Tennessee, you're on the air.
Yeah, Jim. This governmental structure that's being put together now is one in which the son of perdition, mentioned in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, will operate out of and most likely it'll come out of the UN. Whoever is the secretary of the UN governing body over all these nations, keep your eyes on Obama. He was voted the most popular man for 4 years in the world, for 4 years in a row. Just keep your eyes on him, as I think he's going to move toward taking over that position. And thank you for all you do, brother.
Thanks for your perspective, Merle. Laura in Hollywood, Maryland, you're on the air.
Good afternoon, Jim. It's just interesting to me of all this is just you're seeing prophecy unfold right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I just hear the Savior's footsteps closer and closer each and every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the things that we can do is, like you said, get involved, calling our senators, doing the things, staying in the gap, and sharing the gospel.
Indeed.
What a better time with all this turmoil and chaos to give people hope.
Yeah. Amen. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
John in Dallas, Texas, you're on the air.
Thank you, Jim. So you brought up the idea that eating meat is an issue, but we know that we didn't eat meat before the flood, and during the millennium we will not be eating meat. So I don't see why it should be a problem.
Okay. Well, God has given us the ability to eat meat, and certainly we see that in the book of Genesis taking place there. And if you don't want to eat meat, John, you don't have to eat meat. But there is certainly many who are listening to this program that is also their livelihood, and so therefore, that comes into play with us here too. But do you want a United Nations body telling you that you're not able to eat meat?
Well, for me, it's not an issue. First of all, especially processed meat, it's very highly associated.
Okay, so do you want a government body even telling you what vegetables you can eat and what can be planted in our fields across the United States?
Well, not all of the food, but
this is control over the food supplies.
Why meat should be an issue because during the millennium there's not going to be any predatory.
Okay, this is not the millennium here, John. Thank you. Karen is calling from Milwaukee. You're on the air.
Yeah. First of all, we just need to keep the government out.
Just one moment, please. Okay, go ahead, Karen.
What's happening? Okay, we just, as much as possible, keep the government out of decisions for our bodies, whether it's food, whether it's health, whatever it is. This is very surreal when I looked at this conference online. Thank God for VCY, because this creeped up on a lot of people.
Yeah.
And Gary Kyle let us know that the summit was beginning yesterday.
Yeah.
We've got to get on our knees. This is real prophecy right in front of our eyes.
Yeah. Thank you so very much. Mary in Dallas, Texas, you're on the air.
Hi. Yes, I just wanted to say, it infuriates me that, more people aren't knowledgeable and aware. Why aren't we marching on the UN? Why aren't we marching on Washington? I know the march that I'm doing is praying and holding prayer meetings in my house, but I feel like this is the beginning of, the end times and maybe the end of programs like VCY, and where will we be then at that point?
Thank you for your call here, Mary. I wish we had more time for calls. We're completely out of time. Theme music coming up here at this point. But, friends, indeed, this is before us. And, God has each of us here for such a time as this. So let's be effective in prayer warriors and pray for people to come to faith in Christ. I really believe time is short upon this earth, and people need to go because there's one of two eternal destinies: everlasting life with Jesus in heaven, or everlasting torment in a place called hell. God bless you, friends. Thanks for joining us here today on Crosstalk. Be informed, be aware.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208. Or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.